Okay, so we're towards the beginning of chapter 35. If you're using the lessons in Tanya, we're in volume 2. We just got started in volume 2. And we just started learning chapter 35, which really is a beginning of a new idea. And what we're talking about is the word la'asoto, la'asoisoi, which is the one word which means to do it. That's the word in the verse that the Tanya begins with. That the Alter Rebbe bases the entire Tanya really on this one verse. And his questions about this verse, where Moshe says to the Jewish people that the words of the Torah and the mitzvahs are not far from you. They're very near to you in your mouth and in your heart to do it. So we talked about how you can have the right feelings, you can have the right love and fear for Hashem, the joy that you have to have in the service of Hashem. And now he's emphasizing, he's putting a focus on the word la'asoisai, to do it. The importance of the action, the importance of the actual deed of the mitzvah. So he started chapter 35 with quoting from the Yenuka, right? This child prodigy that's quoted in the Zohar. And the Yenuka says that the verse that says, or the expression that says, Chacham einav beroishai, a wise person, his eyes are in his head. The meaning of that is that because the Shekhinah rests on our heads, the Shekhinah rests on the head of man, and you want to constantly be aware of the Shekhinah, Hashem's presence upon you. So you're constantly aware, the wise person is constantly aware of the Shekhinah, the presence of Hashem in your life, which is right on top of your head. And the point that he's making is that you have to be careful to keep it there and to do what it takes to make that possible, to make that connection between yourself and the Shekhinah and the presence, Hashem's presence, possible. How do you do that? So the answer is, he says, the body is like a wick, is like the wick of a candle, and the flame is the Shekhinah. But if all you have is a flame and a wick, then first of all, the flame is going to burn out very quickly. The wick will burn up very quickly. And second of all, the flame will not be a very pleasant one. In order to have a long-lasting, pleasant flame, you have to have oil. In other words, in order to keep the Shekhinah present in your life, upon you, you have to have something equivalent to the oil in the analogy. And the Zohar says that the oil is good deeds. The mitzvahs that we do is the oil that keeps the Shekhinah with us, upon us. This is all the beginning of the Alter Rebbe's lengthy explanation of the idea, the importance of the deed of the mitzvah. That's where we're going with all this. That kavanah is good, love and fear of Hashem is very important, joy in your service of Hashem is paramount, but at the end of the day, the bottom line really is getting the mitzvah done. The question is, if the problem with the wick, with the body being the wick, not being able to keep the flame burning, is that the body is too coarse, which is how it's explained in Chassidus. The body is too coarse, too unrefined, and therefore it can't make a pleasant flame, and it can't keep the flame for very long. And therefore you need oil, which is much more refined than a wick. So in us, the body is too coarse, too unrefined. So you would think that in order to fix the problem, you need something very refined, very spiritual, very uncoarse, right? Why isn't that the soul? Why can't we simply say the body is too coarse, it's too unrefined to keep the flame burning on the flame of the Shekhinah burning on my head? So you need to have a neshama, which is a piece of God, and it's purely spiritual and it's completely refined, and that should be the oil. Why does the Yanuka, why does the Zohar say that the oil, the fuel that keeps the Shekhinah burning on my head is mitzvahs? Why not the neshama? It's a perfectly logical question. And that's the question that the Alter Rebbe asks now after finishing the quote from the Yanuka, from the Zohar. So we're on page 468. Middle of the page. Vehine. Be'er Moshel Zed, the explanation of this analogy, Shehim Shil Ored Hashchina LaOred Haner, that the Zohar compares the light of the Shechina to the light of a candle, She'enei Meir V'nechaz Bapsila B'li Shemen, which cannot illuminate and cannot hold on to the wick without fuel, without oil. I'm going to explain this better. Bekach ein hashchina shoyda al gufa adam. The same is true of the Shechina, that it cannot rest on the body of man. Shenim shalipsila, which is compared to the wick. Ela al yedei ma'asim tovim dafka, only with good deeds. That's the only way. Veloy dai loy b'nishmasai. It's not enough that you have a neshama. That doesn't suffice. Shehi chelik alekamimal, even though the neshama is a piece of God from above. Lihiyois hi keshem and lapsila, that it should be the oil for the wick. Doesn't do it. The answer to this puzzle is clear and understandable to anyone who can think this through. This is going to be a fun little mental exercise. Kihine, top of page 470. Because Nishmas ha'odam afilu hu tzadik gomor oived Hashem b'yira v'ahava b'tanugim. The neshama of man, even if we're talking about a tzaddik, a perfect tzaddik, even if you were to talk about a perfect tzaddik, someone who serves Hashem with love and fear, and the highest kind of love, the kind of love that comes from ahava b'tanugim, the love of pleasure, the pleasurable love that we talked about. Afal Pikein, nevertheless, Eina Betela b'mitzios legamri libotel v'likolel be'oid havaya mamash. Even the tzaddik, even the perfect tzaddik, his neshama is not completely nullified and absolutely transparent or non-existent before God, to be completely consumed and absorbed into the light of Hashem. To the point where they would be completely one and merged in an absolute unity. Raku davar bifnei atzmai. Rather, the neshama remains a thing, separate from Hashem, so to speak. Yirei Hashem ve'oyhavai. The one who fears Hashem, or the one who loves Hashem. If there is love or fear going on, then there's somebody doing the loving. There's somebody doing the fearing, which means if I'm the complete tzaddik, which means not like the Beinoni who struggles to love Hashem properly but gets the mitzvahs done. Here we're talking about even the complete tzaddik who has this perfect and endless love for Hashem. That's not perfect bittul. That's not complete self-nullification, because you can't have love as long as if you're completely nullified. You can't be completely nullified if you're feeling your emotions. So if you're talking about the average person, and you're trying to imagine the Shekhinah would rest upon the head of the average person because they have a neshama. So you could say, well, the reason that the neshama alone isn't enough is because the neshama's relationship with God is not revealed in the average person, right? It's buried. The neshama is not felt. The person feels love for him or herself. That's the way people are. So it wouldn't be a good argument if we weren't talking about the perfect tzaddik. So therefore, the Alter Rebbe says, even if we're going to talk about the perfect tzaddik, the question is still not a good question. Why? You still can't say that the neshama alone should be enough to keep the Shekhinah burning on my head. Why? Because the neshama will always be something separate other than Hashem. In the case of the tzaddik, the proof is in the fact that there's love and fear, right? That the way that tzaddik serves Hashem is through intense love and genuine fear, genuine awe of Hashem. If you have genuine awe and you have intense love, then you're not absolutely nullified. You're the one doing the loving, which means Hashem is not absolutely one. In order for the Shekhinah to be revealed upon me, the Shekhinah means the truth of Hashem, that Hashem should be revealed in my presence and in my existence. How could Hashem be revealed in my existence if my existence is separate from his and his whole being is all about oneness? So if Hashem's being, if Hashem's identity, if Hashem's definition is one, then how could that possibly be revealed on me? How could that be present in me when I am something other than that one? So to the extent that I exist, that's the extent to which it's impossible for Hashem to be revealed on me. So if you want to say that's the reason that Hashem can't be revealed on the body itself, because of course the body is, but the neshama should take the place of, the neshama isn't going to work either, because the neshama is also separate. I mean, the neshama also has an identity. The neshama loves Hashem. The neshama wants closeness with Hashem. The neshama is in awe of Hashem. All of these things make it special, make it impressive, make it perhaps a true servant of Hashem, but not absolutely nullified before Hashem, because it's experiencing its own emotions, its own attributes, its own midos. So as long as the neshama is experiencing its own midos, it can't be the fuel that causes the Shekhinah to rest upon me. Whereas the mitzvahs and the good deeds, which are the absolute will of Hashem, and I'm sorry, unlike the neshama, which is a thing for itself, acts of mitzvah and good deeds, that's Hashem's will. That is Hashem's will. There you have Hashem himself. And what about the fact that all of the world, all of creation came into existence because of Hashem's will? So isn't my body also Hashem's will? Can't you say the same thing about me? I am Hashem's will. God's will is in fact the source for all worlds and all creations, which Hashem's will comes down to them through the great concealments and the tzimtzum, the contractions and the concealments of Hashem's face, of the supernal will. Coming down through different levels. Ad, it comes down so far through so many contractions and so many concealments, Ad sheyuchlu lihisavois v'lihiboris yesh me'ayin v'davar nifrad b'fnei atzmai. It goes through so many levels of concealment, contraction, and concealment to the point where it can create something that feels totally separate from Hashem. That's what this world is. That's what creation is. And that's why they don't feel separate from Hashem. That's why they don't feel nullified before Hashem, as was mentioned before. Masha Einken ha-mitzvahs, whereas the mitzvahs themselves, shehein pnimius v'tzoynei yisbarich, which are the inner will of Hashem, ein sham hester panim klal, there is no concealment of Hashem's face at all. What's the difference between Hashem's will versus Hashem's inner will? It says Hashem's will is the source for all creations and all things, all worlds and all creations. But the mitzvahs are Hashem's inner will. What's the difference between Hashem's will and Hashem's inner will? So like we've talked about this a number of times. It's like the difference between saying, I really want to go to work today, versus saying, I really want to feed my family. I really want to feed my family. That's my inner will. That's my inner desire. I really want to go to work today is not. I want to go to work today because I need to get my paycheck. And I need to get my paycheck because I need to have the money. And I need to have the money because I need to feed my family. I want to go to work is very external will, not internal will. So what I really want is my internal will. What I want because it'll get me what I really want is external will. So all of creation is Hashem's external will. The mitzvahs are the real desire. So all of the worlds that Hashem creates and all of the creations that he creates in those worlds are all his will, but not internal will. Internal will is why he created them, what for? And that is the performance of mitzvahs. So the mitzvahs, shehein pnimius v'tzoynei yisbarich, they are the internal will, the essential will of Hashem, the most essential desire that Hashem has. Ve'ein sham hester panim klal, in the mitzvahs, in Hashem's essential will, there is no concealment of Hashem's face. And it's interesting to note, just to point out, without getting too deep into it, that he's talking about the pnimius haratzon, the internal will, the innermost will, pnimius. And because this is the pnimius haratzon, the internal will, there's no hester panim, there's no concealment of Hashem's face. It is often pointed out in Chassidus that panim, which means face, and pnimius, which means internal, are etymologically very closely related. Panim and panim mean the same thing. Panim, basically the face is an expression of what's inside. So a concealment of Hashem's face means concealing how Hashem expresses what's deepest and most true to him. That is not concealed in the mitzvah because the mitzvah is his essential will. So there, ein hachaya shebehem davar nifrad b'fnei atzmoi klal. In the mitzvah, in the performance of a mitzvah, in the act of a mitzvah, the divine energy there, the life in them, is not something separate from Hashem. Ela hu meyuchad v'nichlal b'retzoynei yisbarich. The mitzvah is one with Hashem. It's with a real unity. The mitzvah is Hashem. It is Hashem's will. So unlike the neshama, that although it can be very lofty and can be very impressive and can be very dedicated to Hashem and very committed and in the service of Hashem, it can't be compared insofar as its oneness is concerned. It can't be compared with the oneness of the mitzvah itself to Hashem. the mitzvah itself is Hashem. It's actually, Hashem is present in the act of the mitzvah. Whereas in my act of loving Hashem, I am present. If I'm a perfect tzaddik, then a very impressive I is a very devoted and very God-fearing and God-loving I is present, but it's still something other than Hashem. Not so with the mitzvah itself. With the mitzvah itself, that's Hashem. So if you're looking for a way to have Hashem dwell upon you, you need to have that which is completely batal, completely nullified before him, which is not the neshama, it is the mitzvah. Now, the obvious next question is, we're trying to have Hashem rest upon us, right? The Shekhinah rest upon us. And you need to have fuel. And the Alter Rebbe understands from the analogy of the oil that the fuel that the Zohar is implying by way of this analogy, that the fuel that will keep the Shekhinah on my head has to be similar to the oil in the sense that the oil is completely consumed by the flame. It's completely and entirely consumed and disappears. It literally dissolves into the flame. It's gone. There is nothing left of the oil after it's burnt. There's no ash, there's nothing. And from that, the Alter Rebbe derives, from the analogy in the Zohar, the Alter Rebbe derives that's why it has to be the mitzvah and not the neshama. Because the neshama is not completely dissolved into Hashem. The neshama doesn't completely expire into God, whereas the mitzvah does. The mitzvah is absolutely one with Hashem. So we know that, the Alter Rebbe knows that from the analogy in the Zohar. But why is that the case? Why, in fact, does the fuel have to completely be consumed into the flame in order to be effective? Why can't it be partially consumed? Why does the fuel that keeps the Shekhinah on the presence of man, on the head of man, have to be the kind of fuel that is completely nullified and completely consumed and one with Hashem? That's the question he's going to address now. Vihine, to understand this, you have to understand what it means for the Shekhinah to rest. We're trying to figure out why you need a fuel that will be completely consumed in order to have the Shekhinah rest. Well, first you have to understand what it means to have the Shekhinah rest on you. And then you can understand why it has to be with complete nullification. So, Inyan Hashroas HaShekhinah, this concept of the resting of the Shekhinah upon us, what does it mean? Hu Giloy Elekuso Yisbarech, that is the revelation of godliness himself, godliness, blessed be he, the Oid Ein Soif Baruch Hu Be'ezeh Davar, and the infinite light of Hashem upon something. V'hainu loimar, this means to say, she'oy soy davar, that thing, nichlol ba'oir Hashem, is consumed, is included, is absorbed into the light of Hashem, ubotel loy b'mitzios legamri, and is completely nullified before the presence of Hashem entirely. She'oz hu she'shoyda mizgala boyechad Hashem echad, because only then can you have the resting and the revelation of the oneness of Hashem upon that thing. Avol, however, kol ma sheloy batel elav b'mitzios legamri, anything that is not completely nullified before Hashem, ein oid Hashem shoydem mizgala boy. The light of Hashem cannot dwell upon and be revealed in that thing. Ve'af tzadik gomer, even a complete tzaddik, like we mentioned before, shemizdabek boy be'ava rabba, who cleaves to God and connects to God with an incredible love to Hashem, hare les machshava tfisa bei klal be'emes. Still, no intellect, no human intellect can completely, truly grasp Hashem. Not even that of a tzaddik, of the perfect tzaddik. Ki amitas Hashem Elokim emes, because the absolute truth, the real truth of Hashem, the true Hashem, who it is, what is the truth of Hashem? Yechudei v'achdusai. It's the absolute oneness of Hashem, the kind of oneness, like the Rambam explains, is the kind of oneness that doesn't exist anywhere else in anything, in existence. There's no oneness like the oneness of Hashem. Meaning, Hashem is so completely one that in order for the Shekhinah, for that oneness to dwell upon something, that something has to not be a contradiction to the oneness of Hashem. That oneness of Hashem is Shehu Levadoihu. Hashem is the only thing, the only one. The Efes Bil Odoi Mamash, and there is nothing besides Him, literally. Which means, when we say Hashem is one, we say Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. Or you say in the Aleinu, you say Bashamayim Mimal V'ala Oretz Mitochas Ein Oi. There is none other. It doesn't really mean there is none other. It means there's nothing else. If the Shema was implying, if the Shema was saying that there is no other God, it would say Shema Yisrael, Hear O Israel, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem is our God, Hashem Yachid, Hashem is the only one. But it doesn't say Hashem Yachid, it says Hashem Echad. Echad means He is absolutely one, which means there is nothing outside of His oneness. Anything that exists outside of Hashem's oneness is a contradiction to that oneness. So when Hashem created the worlds and all of creation and made them feel like they are something other than that oneness, made them feel, makes us experience ourselves, makes the world feel like, seem like a contradiction to that oneness, that was Hashem really making Himself vulnerable in a way that we can't fathom. He puts his essential, the definition. I mean, the best thing we can do to define Hashem, you can't define Hashem, but to the extent that we can understand Hashem, it's oneness. That is Hashem. And to have that be compromised, there must be a good reason. Why did Hashem do that? Hashem did that because He wants to have a dwelling, right? He wants to have a world in which He feels comfortable. A world that is distant from Him, a world that doesn't feel His oneness, that can make itself the kind of place that is conducive to or welcoming to Hashem's perfect oneness. And that's true of the individual human being also. The reason that I exist is so that I can express, although I feel myself to be something outside of Hashem's oneness, I can find my way into that oneness and express Hashem's oneness. And when I do that, the Shekhinah can rest on me. But as long as I'm still me, I am a contradiction to that oneness. So he says, V'im kain, if it's true that Hashem, the truth of Hashem and the truth of what we mean by Hashem resting upon me means the revelation of that absolute oneness upon me, then v'im kain, if so, zeh ha'oihev, the one that's doing the loving, the tzaddik, shehu yesh v'lo efes, he is a somebody and not nothing, by virtue of the fact that he feels love. That means you're not nothing. Less machshava delay tfisa beklal, then that individual tzaddik, that individual's intellect cannot grasp Hashem. Because the fact that I'm doing the loving, or I'm doing the fearing, or I'm doing the thinking means I am separate from Hashem, by definition. If I love, then ipso facto, I'm not one with Hashem. It's a catch-22. Ve'ein or Hashem shoyro mizgala boy, and therefore the light of Hashem cannot be revealed and dwell upon him. Elo al yedei kiyum hamitzvos. The only way for that tzaddik, even the perfect tzaddik, who has this incredible love, endless love for Hashem and amazing awe of Hashem, that doesn't do it. The only way the Shekhinah can rest on that person, even on that person, is through the performance of a mitzvah. It has to actually go do a mitzvah. Because those mitzvahs that he does, those are the actual will of Hashem and the actual intellect of Hashem, Belisham Hester Panim, without any concealment of the face. But if there's any concealment at all, then that's not the true revelation of the Shekhinah. So if you're going to say that the Shekhinah is resting upon me, that means that Hashem's oneness is revealed upon me in a way that I do not contradict that oneness. There's only one way for that to happen. And my lofty neshama, if I am a perfect tzaddik, does not do it, doesn't cut it. Because my lofty neshama feels its love for Hashem. The only way for Hashem's absolute oneness to be expressed upon me is for me to engage in his will, for me to do his will. Because in his will, he is revealed completely. There's no contradiction to him in his own desire. In the mitzvahs that he wants, there's no contradiction to him. Because I don't have to feel the mitzvah. We're not talking about my desire for the mitzvah. We're talking about my performance of the mitzvah. I don't even have to want to do the mitzvah. I can do the mitzvah begrudgingly and resentfully. Nevertheless, if I do the mitzvah, if the mitzvah gets done, that's a revelation of the absolute oneness of Hashem. His will is being done. More so than the revelation of Hashem through my great love and my great fear of Hashem. Now, mind you, the Alter Rebbe is not downplaying love and fear of Hashem. Quite the contrary, Chassidus puts a tremendous emphasis on the importance of loving and fearing Hashem. So we're not saying that loving and fearing is not important. God forbid, this is very important. But in the context of having the Shekhinah be revealed upon me, the Shekhinah to rest on me, the only way for that to happen is for me to perform a mitzvah. Just parenthetically about the importance of love and fear, there was a classic conversation between the Rebbe, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, our Rebbe, and one of the other Hasidic Rebbes of this last generation. And there's an audio recording of it. It's a beautiful thing. And you hear their conversation. And the Rebbe is trying to convince this other Rebbe, leader of a great Hasidic dynasty, a great Hasidic movement. He's trying to convince him that in their yeshiva system, they should start studying Hasidus in a more in-depth manner. And this Rebbe is telling the Lubavitcher Rebbe that that's not their tradition. Their tradition is to study Hasidic texts, which are esoterica and the secrets of Torah, to study them very superficially and with a kind of awareness that I don't really understand all this. This is beyond me. And it's a kind of lesson in humility. That the students come away knowing that they just got a taste of something really, really awesome, but it's beyond me. And the Rebbe was suggesting that that's not a good tradition. And the Rebbe explained his opinion. The Rebbe said that the study of Hasidus in depth is very important because you have to know how to perform the mitzvahs if you're going to do so successfully. If you're going to perform mitzvahs, you have to know how. So with all of the mitzvahs, if you want to know how to perform a mitzvah, you want to know how to keep Shabbos, you want to know how to put on tefillin, you want to know how to go to the mikveh, you want to know how to do any of the mitzvahs, you open the Code of Jewish Law and you read it, and it tells you how to do the mitzvah. But there are two mitzvahs that the Code of Jewish Law does not spell out for us, doesn't tell you how. And those are the mitzvah to love Hashem and the mitzvah to fear Hashem. The Rebbe says the only place you're going to learn how to do that is in Hasidic philosophy, in the study of Hasidus. So if you don't teach, the Rebbe is saying to this other Rebbe, if you don't teach your students Hasidic texts in depth, how will they ever come to know how to properly love Hashem and how to properly fear Hashem? It's a beautiful conversation. It's an amazing thing. I only bring that up parenthetically to point out that, just to mention that we're not, God forbid, we're not talking about diminishing the importance of loving and fearing Hashem. Loving and fearing Hashem is the bedrock of our relationship, etc. It's in the Shema, v'ahavta Hashem Elokecha. You have to love God with all your heart and all your might and all your soul. So just thought I'd throw that in parenthetically. But insofar as we want the Shekhinah to rest upon us, and the Zohar says the way to do that is by performing mitzvahs, the explanation for that is that the neshama itself, because of its love and fear, is at a disadvantage because it feels itself, it experiences itself. And as long as it's experiencing itself, it's not able to experience the oneness of God, because I am a contradiction to that oneness. Or to put it more, I is a contradiction to Hashem's oneness. A little bit of the I of me, the I is a contradiction to Hashem's oneness. Now in the footnote on page 474, the Alter Rebbe says, kind of a very personal reflection here. The Alter Rebbe says, "V'kasher shamati mimoirei olav hashalom." Like I heard from my teacher, he should rest in peace. Speaking of the Maggid of Mezrich, the Hasidic movement was started by the Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov's primary successor was the Maggid of Mezrich, and the Maggid of Mezrich was the teacher of the Alter Rebbe. So the Alter Rebbe says, as I heard from my teacher, the Maggid of Mezrich, Pirush v'tam lema shekosav beitz chayim she'oyde ein soif baruch hu eina misyachid afilu ba'olam ha'atzilus ela al yedei hislabshusa etchilu b'sfiras ha'chachma. He heard from, the Alter Rebbe says, he heard from his teacher that even in the world of Atzilus, which is the highest form of creation, it's the closest existence to Hashem. In other words, they're classically known as the four worlds, the four levels of creation, of God's creative expression. The highest one, which is the opposite of the lowest one, right? We're in the lowest world, which means where Hashem is least felt. The highest world is where Hashem is most felt. So the lowest world is where Hashem is least felt to the extent that it's still possible to be in existence. And the highest world is the highest world where Hashem is most felt, and yet it's able to be in existence. That makes sense? Creation or anything outside of Hashem has to have divine energy to exist, but has to have concealment in order to exist. Hashem's creative energy has to be there, but has to be concealed. Because if the divine energy isn't there, it can't exist. If the divine energy isn't concealed, then nothing can exist. So to create, Hashem does emanate his creative energy, for lack of a better expression, but it's with his face concealed. And the extent to which his face is concealed is the extent to which that level of existence experiences him. And the more concealment there is, the less it experiences him, and the lower it is. The less the concealment, the more that level of creation experiences him, and the closer it is to him. So the highest level is Atzilus. In other words, there is where the whole creative concept is just getting started, and there's the least possible concealment. And even there, the Eitz Chaim says, the Kabbalah says, that the Ein Sof, the light of the Ein Sof, the light of the infinite, cannot be completely one there with the world of Atzilus, unless it is first invested or enclosed in, wrapped in the attribute of Chachma. V'hainu, this is because, Mishum, she'Ein Sof Baruch Hu echad ha'emes, because the Ein Sof is absolute, true oneness. Shehu levadoi hu ve'ein zolase, which means he is absolutely the only thing, the only one, and there is nothing besides him. V'zohi madregas ha'chachma v'chulu, that is only possible within the realm of chachma, or that comprehension in the world of Atzilus, the comprehension of the absolute oneness of God, is what makes the resting or the joining with the Ein Sof possible on that level of existence. Now, you and me are not going to understand this completely. What we need to get from this is that even in the highest worlds, even in the highest that level of creation, or that level of existence, or that level of Hashem's creative expression, whatever, the world of Atzilus, even there, you have this problem of it's not absolutely one with him by virtue of the fact that there is some concealment. If there's even the slightest bit of concealment, just enough to make something outside of him, well, then he's already not being felt as absolutely one. So in that realm, in the realm of Atzilus, the attribute of Chachma, of intellect, of wisdom, can get to a point where it can understand its own self out of existence. But that's only in Atzilus. Here, in our realm, even the highest tzaddik can't do that. You can't think yourself out of existence, because as long as you're thinking, you're a somebody. As long as you're feeling, you're a something. So the Alter Rebbe here is explaining that when the Zohar says that the fuel that keeps the Shechina resting upon me is mitzvahs, it's specifically because the mitzvah is where Hashem's absolute oneness is felt, more so than in my love and my fear. Because when I love Hashem, I'm after all expressing my feeling, my sentiments. So there's a lot of me involved. When I perform a mitzvah, it's just Hashem's will being enacted.